Okay, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. While others are joining, we will start with this webinar. And I would like to welcome you all and thank you again for joining the fourth webinar, which is on assessing the value of nature-based solution projects, cost-benefit analysis for strategic design and impact. And this is the fourth one, and I would like to thank you again for joining the phase 3, and I hope you are assessing the post-webinar materials that we have been sharing. Just before we begin, we have few housekeeping matters. Please keep your mic muted unless you are you can unmute during question and answer session, or you have any, and during breakout groups. And also the chat, in the chat box, please, if you have any queries, any questions, keep writing in the chat box. We will when there's a question and answer session, and then we will go back to the question. So please keep writing in the chat box. And for now, please write your name and where you are joining from for this session. And for this webinar, the expected outcome is to understand the key evaluation techniques and metrics used in NBS focused CBA, and learn how to measure and compare ecological, social, and economic benefits and cost. Also examine the comparative cost effectiveness of NBS versus conventional engineered solution, and review real-life case studies applying CBA in Pacific Island context. And finally, gain tools to inform strategic NBS decisions and influence national policy. So under PIPIN project, as we mentioned in our first webinar, different implementing partners have different outcomes. And for GGI, the main outcome is in cost-benefit analysis. So the whole in this webinar is mostly led by the GGI team. And mostly, if you look at this briefly in the nutshell, cost-benefit analysis is simply identifying cost and benefits and then comparing it, and then helping to decide if the project is worth. So this is just a brief definition, but the experts will go over this in great detail in this webinar. So briefly looking at the agenda, so our first speaker is Natalie, and Natalie will be, our first speaker will be Nicola, and he will be setting the stage for this webinar. He will introduce the tools for evaluating NBS project, then followed by Charlotte. And then we'll have Charlotte is economic and policy consultant for GGI. She will do comparative analysis on NBS versus conventional engineered solution. And then we will have Natalie. Natalie is our Pacific regional adaptation lead with GGI, and also she's the lead with the PPN project. And she will look at the fundamentals of cost-benefit analysis for NBS project. So after these three speakers, then we will have a breakout session, group work that will reflect on CBA and comparative assessment of, followed by this breakout group. Today we'll have a breakout session. I got some feedback from previous webinars. We'll have bigger groups this time, and everyone will be presenting after this breakout session. After this breakout session, we will have again, we'll have Natalie. She will talk about case studies, application of CBA to NBS in Fiji, Tonga, and Vanuatu. This was done under PIPIN project, and she will share the result with you. And finally, we will be having Dr. Nilesh Gounder. He's a Chief Policy Advisor with Ministry of Finance in Fiji, and he'll be using CBA, talking about how to use CBA to influence national NBS-related policy decisions. And then we'll have a Q&A session, and then we'll close up the webinar. So if you have seen the agenda, these are our speaker, and when they are starting this their session, they will introduce themselves in this webinar. So without further ado, to start our session, we are honored to have Nicholas Taylor. with us as a global adaptation lead at GGI. And Nicholas has been in the forefront of integrating economic evaluation and nature-based solution. So he will provide us with the foundational insight. So let's give a warm welcome to Nicholas as he takes us through the fundamentals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rakashni. Good morning from Seoul. I'm very excited to be here today. And let me just pull up my slides 1 second. Am I visible, Rakashni, now?
Yes, if you could.
Yeah, good. Okay, great.
With some presentation mode, maybe.
Yeah.
It is. All good?
Yes, all good, Nicholas.
Great. Okay. Hi, colleagues. So yeah, my name is Nick Taylor. I lead GGGI's adaptation and resilience workstream based from our HQ in Korea. So this means that we work, so I work with the global team, but I also work in a kind of matrix fashion with the colleagues that you have on hand here today. So Natalie, that you will hear from soon, and others. We work in partnership across many projects globally. So it's not like HQ knows best. I'd say the way in which we work at GGGI is very much a very flat format, in the sense that we develop technical expertise across various areas, and those filter up to the HQ level and vice versa. So I think the having the HQ starting can kind of give the impression that we are somehow leading, but I think it's definitely a partnership. So just with the adaptation, I wanted to be, I'm glad to be the one that is contextualizing to an extent the way in which adaptation finance connects really with a certain number of other major adaptation planning tools. I mean, I don't want to be also the one that is boring everybody with a bit of a rant around adaptation planning, but I wanted to add that in a little bit at the start, because this is also something that we are very heavily involved with in the Pacific region. We're doing 4 different NAPs and adaptation readiness processes in the region. And for me, these are really sort of fundamental bases for building your toolbox for adaptation finance. So what we're doing, so this slide is maybe a little bit confusing, so I'll give you a little bit of a background. We're doing a piece of work with the Adaptation Fund and with UNFCCC, where we're trying to understand how and why adaptation finance does not scale particularly well. Because as we all know, adaptation is fundamentally something that is community driven. All good adaptation comes out of the knowledge that comes out of communities. And I think if anybody knows that well, you know that well in the Pacific. It is your local communities that are exposed in your coastlines, in your hillsides, in your riverine areas. It is not somebody sitting in an office in South Korea or Bonn or New York that knows what your adaptation program needs to be. So at the same time, while the knowledge of what that adaptation need is local and situated in these places, the need for bringing additional finance and for formalizing finance, for bringing scale across geographies and replicating best practices does come from other locations, comes from ministries, it comes from technical partners, it comes from businesses, it comes from many places, right? So we've been having a lot of discussions with various partners about how can we settle what we see is a bit of a tension between this need for this global replication, scaling, standardization of adaptation action, of adaptation technical skills and approaches. How do we settle that standardized, that trend, sorry, a bit early here in Seoul, that need and tendency towards standardization that you need from the finance and policy world, and settle that with the needs of locally led adaptation, the needs of tailor-made solutions, and the needs of place-based approaches. So while there are a couple of different strategies we're following for that. We're doing global policy partnerships, we're doing financing facilities and all kinds of things. One of the things that we are sort of really settling on is that plans are still the most fundamental thing. Adaptation plans, which are not necessarily these large unwieldy processes, but ones that are streamlined and ones that are able to somehow be streamlined and community driven, but also which connect always to finance, right? So what is the magic within the plan? How can we build those plans in a sense that they are the ones that leverage finance? So let me I'll come back. Just wanted to go straight to this slide. So we at GGGI, as we have the mic as the lead organization for this webinar, just wanted to say that what I see, I think, is a value in an organization, I think, and it's similar with other organizations that are partnering on this program, is that we're of a good enough scale that we are able to look to manage the policy and planning approaches and see those lead through to finance. So this is what we see as the GGGI value chain, and the way, and this is the prism and the lens through which we tackle most of our adaptation and resilience work, always through understanding what types of policies and plans and frameworks are in place beforehand. Are there taxonomies in place? Are there the accurate and weather data institutions and mechanisms in place? Are these able to build the pipelines and the understanding of projects, and then establish really what is needed in terms of the technical scale of projects and the partnerships needed to make those projects function. So this is my little rant around NAPS, and I would gladly join and meet with other colleagues to understand what they feel the adaptation planning sort of secret sauce is. Like, where are we seeing the plans really build through to finance? I have a couple of ideas, and these are just the sort of headline ideas that I wanted to bring through in this webinar. And I think the Pacific is really such a valuable and just one of the leading regions to demonstrate this, partly because the economies, I think, that we are seeing, so the topic of nature-based solutions, for example, is one where you're highlighting the relationship between the natural assets and the economies of the place, but also the aligned interest between countries, communities, governments. There's like not a big differential of scale as you would see in many places. Government is relatively flat. Stakeholders are really kept to account, and local actors are participating in national government, and national government has access to donors. So I think that very flat system of governance, and I think the relatively, I'd say, progressive approach of certain donors also makes, for me, the region one that will see it be continuing to be one of the leaders in this area. So this slide is just a couple of the NAPs that we are doing. Yeah, we did a global study in 2024 of all of the NAPs that had thus far been submitted through to UNFCCC. And surprise, surprise, the main challenge that we saw within these NAPs is that most of them were having an issue with none of them had really the mechanisms or the elements in place for leveraging finance. They didn't have any of the rules. They didn't have any of the taxonomies. You could say NAPs are not necessarily meant to have these things in place, but as the new UNFCCC guidelines are coming out this year, and the focus is very much on finance, we can see hopefully that a lot of these more specific finance-related policy tools and plans will hopefully now be part of the requirements of NAPs, or at least part of the requirements for the implementation of the NAPs themselves. Just aware of time as well. So this approach to NAPs, I think, is really, this approach to finance from planning is something that we are trying to standardize to an extent and trying to bring across from different experiences and different approaches, and homogenize into different countries to the extent to which that is possible. The CBA approaches, which I think, so I wanted to speak a little bit more to some of my own experiences, which is more in developing cost-benefit analyses from an investment lens in the development of and leveraging of different types of GCF or different other investment projects from other donor partners. So let me just sort of go back to the definition as I was asked to bring in the definition. So, the purpose of CBA being to compare total benefits versus, sorry, my screen. Compare total benefits versus total cost of NBS projects. And some of the key steps of CBA being to identify all the costs and benefits, including hidden ones, quantify in monetary terms using ecosystem services evaluation methods, for example, and compare against alternatives such as grey infrastructure or do nothing scenarios. So some of the special considerations for NBS projects to be integrated into CBA is that they have a long-term time horizon. So NBS benefits, of course, as we know, grow over time, and this discounting is important. Co-benefits such as biodiversity, recreation, carbon capture, health improvements are the main things that we are integrating into that understanding. And then assessing that assessment of uncertainty is key. So understanding to what extent future climate threats are really going to potentially alter the different strategies that we are putting forward as part of our NBS strategies. And then the examples, I think, that's the obvious one is the difference between an NBS intervention and a grey one. This is obviously very, very high level. My colleagues will go into greater depth. So NBS being an example being mangrove restoration. It has a much longer lifespan. The benefits being much greater on the NBS side with a higher net present value than a concrete seawall. I wanted to just wrap up with a bit of an example, which I think is, for me, trying to pull together these different threads and this sort of local versus national, and how support for NBS valuation, and I think that cost benefit analysis is a powerful approach, and understanding its implementation and the implementation of cost benefit analysis as part of NBS is really also on the project level. So this is a project that we're doing in Indonesia with KOICA and the Green Climate Fund. So this is still at the concept note level. But what we wanted to do here was institutionalize the use of nature-based solutions. So understanding the NBS, so in this case, the NBS was trying to tackle flooding issues in 2 different cities in the new capital region in Indonesia. They are moving the new capital to, the capital to a new city called Nusantara, which is on Borneo. And while we were promoting the use of NBS in the new capital to the government, they were very much saying to us, but how can you prove that this works? And why do we, how are we going to maintain the NBS? How are we going to ensure that, all of this tree planting and all of this emphasis on green infrastructure is not going to be, bad finance that is thrown into a black hole? How do we monitor it? And I think the message I wanted to leave you with is that what we try to put into place here is a mechanism through which the governments themselves are trained and capacitated to design and implement and maintain the NBS itself, with a big emphasis on performance. So NBS can be treated like any other infrastructure, in the sense that it needs to be you need to understand whether it is doing the things you need it to do. So you need to understand whether it is holding the silt. For example, in the case of mangrove, you need to understand whether it is purifying water, whether it is holding the integrity of a slope together. So for us, it's about ensuring that the local government in this case was able to monitor and maintain and have the finance for maintenance of these things, and that they were able to report to national government and receive additional financing for this. So just to say that there are many, while we're not simply pitting green against gray, there are mechanisms through which we're able to program in institutional measures and capacity measures and financing measures and sort of lock in, if you will, some of these benefits and make sure that the cost benefit is really evident, and that the NBS measures are able to sort of sing out against the necessities of grey infrastructure. I'm a little bit unclear on time, but I'd say I'm probably at my time. I will stop there for now, and glad to join the group work soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for providing us the great outlook on NAP and for providing us with a clear understanding on the fundamentals of cost-benefit analysis for NBS. Our next speaker is Charlotte, who will walk us through comparative analysis and shedding light on advantages that NBS can offer. Charlotte, the floor is yours now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. One moment. Okay. Okay, Rakeshni?
Yeah, it's great, Charlotte. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Nick, for that presentation. So I'll just introduce myself very quickly. So I'm Charlotte Shepherd. I have a background in economics and climate finance. I used to be a climate finance advisor for GGGI, and most recently have just been doing a regional investment strategy for NBS in the Pacific. So thank you for having me here today. I'll be discussing cost-benefit analysis for NBS, and particularly how CBAs can be used to compare nature-based solutions with traditional grey infrastructure. So I'll go through the steps of a CBA, and at each point I'll just reinforce how we compare the grey with the NBS or a combination of the two, which is often the case. So we've just heard a bit of background about CBAs, so I won't go into too much detail here. Essentially it compares the costs and benefits of a project or policy or initiative. I will just touch on this briefly. So I think there's often a lot of confusion between a financial analysis and economic analysis. So an economic analysis can include a economic cost-benefit analysis, which is what we're talking about here. As Nick just mentioned, it's put into monetary terms to compare the costs and benefits, but that doesn't mean it's an assessment of financial flows. That's the financial analysis. So it really wants to look at total costs and benefits to everyone. Whether or not they receive or give money is not what's being considered. And that's why it's a great tool for organizations that aren't focused on profits. So for donors, for NGOs, for governments, it's a really important tool to be able to understand all the benefits that a project might create. So we've got 4 steps here, and the first one is to, as part of a CBA, and the first one is to define the project that you're looking into, and the counterfactual, which is a bit of, technical jargon in a sense. It's just comparing the scenarios. So one scenario is nature-based solution, and then that's often compared to a grey infrastructure scenario, and also a do nothing or business as usual scenario. So the first thing is to really think out what each of these involves, starting with the do nothing or business as usual scenario. So we use seawalls a lot as an example in MBS. Obviously, there's many more examples, but it's quite a good one to kind of get your head around and compare the different scenarios. So maybe there's some communities which are being damaged by the oceans. They're close to the sea, and maybe waves are coming and damaging infrastructure and houses. So doing nothing, if you think about that scenario, that'll probably keep happening every year. Sea levels are rising. It might get worse. And so this first step is, really going into detail on what that might look like, so that we can then compare the difference when we look at NBS or grey infrastructure. So then you'd look at what an NBS scenario looked like, mangroves, boulders, that kind of thing, and how much benefits that could achieve for the communities, and also what the costs of that are. And then the grey infrastructure scenario, which I think in the past has been quite common for things like this. And so there's lots of examples on kind of what the impacts of that were, good and bad, good costs and benefits, that can be then compared to the other 2 scenarios. Okay, now once the scenarios have been described in detail, what they would look like, then the costs and benefits of each ones can be identified. The next step is to quantify them, but identifying and really just doing a qualitative assessment can be really useful initially. So I'll stick with the example of the seawalls and the grey infrastructure versus nature-based solution. So for the nature-based solution, the benefits would be protecting the communities and infrastructure and houses. So there's like safety and reduction in damages as a benefit. That's likely to be a benefit for the grey infrastructure as well. But an additional benefit for the NBS would be the environmental benefits as well. So maybe those are ecosystem services or carbon sequestration from planting. So these are additional benefits that wouldn't occur under the grey scenario, and they also wouldn't occur under the business as usual scenario. In terms of costs for the different scenarios, so business as usual might have no costs because no one is actively kind of implementing any initiatives. So no costs for business as usual, but also, there are costs to kind of no operational or capital costs. The costs are in the form of the fact that that communities might still be undergoing kind of damage and stuff from not having a seawall. But so for nature-based solution, there'd be costs of kind of initiating the project, maybe seedlings, maybe planting, kind of labor costs potentially. And these are all the things that need to be included. Now, typically these costs are lower than grey infrastructure. You could look at other examples of how these compare, which can be really helpful in kind of creating net impacts, so creating net benefits. So if there's a lot of benefits and smaller costs, then it's going to be a really great project, and that really helps NBS. That really makes NBS a great choice not all of the time, but in many circumstances. So you'd identify the costs and benefits for each scenario. Here's an example. I'll keep running through, but here's an example that can maybe be looked at later in detail if anyone's interested. And then you need to value the costs and benefits. So this can be difficult, especially benefits. So costs can be a bit easier to understand because it's typically kind of OPEX, CAPEX. You can look at previous projects, you can do estimated budgets for what they might look like, and quite easy to kind of wrap your head around as well because they are real physical costs. And so, as I mentioned, this might be lower for NBS compared to the grey infrastructure scenario, but both are likely to be higher than a do-nothing scenario in terms of costs. So what you do is kind of compare all three and then also compare the benefits. So compared to a business as usual, both a nature-based and a grey infrastructure solution are likely to have benefits. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the kind of protection and reduction in damages is a key one. And then for NBS, the other one is maybe kind of environmental benefits. So the valuation techniques there can be quite complicated, but there's also kind of easy approaches to them. Recently in my work, I came across, I think it's Brep's work on valuing ecosystem services, and they've done that in a few countries, which is a really helpful resource in terms of it provides different types of plants, for example, mangroves, and then it will give you a $1 per hectare, and that's the benefits per hectare of mangroves and it's the benefits. It describes it really well in some of their reports, but there's all the ecosystem benefits, all the benefits from the people living around there in terms of maybe kind of, like I mentioned, all the different ecosystems working together, research, education, senses of well-being, being close to nature. There's a lot of them that are included in the ecosystem service benefits, but having a source where you could kind of take out that value per hectare is really helpful for comparing different options. The other one I mentioned is carbon sequestration. So I had a conversation with someone a while ago. I'd use the social cost of carbon as a benefit for a project. And one of my colleagues said, but you're not going to get the social cost of carbon. They're not going to get those carbon credits for that value. And as I kind of mentioned at the start, that's not the point of a CBA. It's not the financial flows. Including that doesn't mean necessarily that money is going to be coming in. But what it means is that that represents the total value to people. So it can still be used, and that kind of really shows the total benefits. I'll keep going through. So usually you map out these over a certain time period, maybe 30 years, same time period for each scenario, and then bring it back into present value using a discount rate. And my recent research showed that there's a lot of different discount rates being used. So obviously it depends on the type of project, the country. I think this estimate of social discount rates, this table is a bit old now, but anything online from about 3% to about even up to 12% was quite normal. There's an argument for lower discount rates when it comes to nature-based solutions. And that's because a lot of the costs are upfront and the benefits are out in the future, and when put into today's value, really want to accurately portray that those future benefits are very important to society. Whereas if you use a discount rate that's too high, it makes them seem lower than they actually are. So I won't go into discount rates too much, but anyway, if you're reading up on different CBAs, just something to note. Have a look what discount rate is used and how that may affect the overall impacts. As I mentioned, a higher discount rate places less weight on the future costs and benefits, whereas a lower discount rate places more weight on those. So I mean, I'd recommend a lower discount rate for projects with environmental benefits. There's a lot of best practice guides, including Asian Development Bank, World Bank, SPREP, SPC, PIFs. I added New Zealand Treasury guide here because I'm based in New Zealand, and that's what I've often used, and it's I find it a really good resource in order to understand CBAs better. So there you go. I think I've run out of time, so I'll stop there, but thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for that insightful comparative analysis. We can see that it's clear that NBS is not only present innovative solution, but also it has a significant advantage over conventional methods. So now I'd like to take a moment to think about how we can actively measure and evaluate this solution into real world scenarios. So Natalie will now share with us some practical tools on evaluating NBS project. And after Natalie's presentation, then we'll have a breakout group session. So Natalie, we are all looking forward for your insight. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm hoping this is not going to be death by PowerPoint. I have a very detailed PowerPoint that was kindly prepared by one of our climate finance advisors. So I will not be going into all the details, but I would encourage the participants that are interested to take a closer look. So this work has been done through the Pippin project, and that's led by IUCN. So I think quite a few of my colleagues have already shared what NBS might mean. IUCN has a formal definition. I think globally, NBS has really been seen as a potential solution, both in the developed and developing countries as a cost-effective solution. And here we have a quote by the European Commission, and it really kind of goes to show that, yes, it's supported by nature, but it helps, it has economic benefits and builds resilience, and it really helps build a more diverse and natural features, both in cities and in more rural interventions. Okay, so hopefully. So Nicholas started mentioning about how the steps for CBA, and Charlotte went into a little bit more depth from an economic perspective. And so I'll just take you through a few steps, practical steps on how to do CBA for especially for NBS projects. I was very encouraged by the progress that's being done by Nicholas and his team in HQ to support Indonesia. There's a real possibility of having NBS at scale. And I hope that people on the line are also looking a little bit beyond NGOs and really trying to integrate this at a wider scale. So the decision tree, it's been simplified here by my colleague Shelveen. So to identify the problem and risk, to see if there's societal issues or risk impacting the municipality, and kind of takes you through if yes, if no, look at the frequency, look at the priorities, and then look at the different solutions. And if the current solutions are not effective, then consider the feasibility of NBS alternatives. So this kind of takes you through, and at the final stage, we do an NBS. So this is just to show that I wouldn't do a CBA for a solution straight away. I think there's a little bit of thinking to be establishing the scenarios, looking at if actually the current solution is actually sustainable, maybe just needs a little improvement. But if the current solution is not effective or feasible, and the problem suitable for an NBS intervention, which isn't always the case, then I would suggest to go to the CBA. So a lot of you will already be familiar with the project lifecycle, so I won't go too much into that, but I think this kind of nicely depicts what this can look like for an NBS project. And in the identification and formulation phase, it's really when you should be looking at the different options. And once you've looked at the different options and the CBA's helped assess which one is looking like a better solution, then you would look at the formulation and you can do a more detailed CBA. So CBA isn't just necessarily a one-off set of calculations. It's really a tool to help decision making. And our donor New Zealand was also keen to kind of point out that sometimes the decision making isn't always for just investment. It can also be for policy. Sometimes budget needs to be put forward for policy, and CBA for policy is also worth considering. So the focus of this brief presentation is really the assessment part of a CBA, but then afterwards that there's a need to kind of go beyond and prepare the TOR. So the CBA is kind of really looking at the step one of this part, and step 1 to 3, let's say, where you're identifying the costs and benefits. And with the climate data, it can help look at how the climate risks and trends affects the projects, and that can also have implications on the potential costs, especially in terms of damage. So if you know the climate risks and you know what the maximum, for instance, in coastal resilience, the maximum wave height might be, but you need that data. So there's a need to have your costs and benefits data, but there's also a need to understand and have accurate data and projections on climate, depending on the scenario that you're looking at. And then afterwards, you would quantify the costs and benefits, but it really is a process, and it isn't just about plugging into an Excel sheet. And I'm mentioning an Excel sheet because as part of the Pippin project, we looked at the different tools that were available, and there are some really good ones out there. SPREP has done some, I think SPC's also got some, and we just try to compile a little bit and simplify and have a tool, but a tool in itself is not the panacea. There are steps that are needed to identify the costs and the benefits and take into account the climate data, and then quantify the costs and benefits. And then, of course, look at the financing options. So these are some of the questions that I would encourage people that are involved in NBS solution definition to be thinking of beyond the costs and benefits. A large part of IUCN's definition on MBS is really to benefit communities. And so looking at the challenges related to climate change, biodiversity loss, or socioeconomic inequalities is important. So it's, again, beyond just numbers. And here there are some steps that have kind of been laid out nicely to try and make sure that we're thinking about all the different criteria, but also to think of the different options. I generally recommend to go simple, but there are, I've mentioned an Excel-based model, but there's also some systems dynamic models, which I think for some experts would be probably quicker to use as you look at different scenarios, both in terms of climate risk, in terms of potentially the population affected, and that can kind of recalculate. But for those that are maybe starting and doing those first back of the envelope calculations, I think an Excel model is perfectly fine. It's good, if possible, to have location-specific data. So that is not just for climate risk, but it's also for costs. The costs of some materials, even for nature-based solutions, so rocks and so on, that may be available freely in some sites, but not in others. So it really needs to be location-specific. Some spatially explicit analysis, also the access to the sites, the vulnerabilities. Again, it's very location specific. And then, as I mentioned before, the climate data and forecasts are important. I think there's some really good climate data for Fiji, but also other Pacific islands. I think as some of the most vulnerable places on the planet, I think this data really needs to be used where possible, and there's a lot of data out there. And then, of course, there are some literature reviews and CBAs that have maybe been done elsewhere, but also beyond CBAs, just looking at different potential technical solutions or NBS variations. Sometimes variations can make a difference within the CBA in terms of benefits and costs. So looking at just even small variations in hybrid solutions is recommended. And that results in an integrated cost-benefit analysis. So I think this is kind of going into a lot of detail, and I just encourage you to look at the slides for those that are interested. And I think my colleague Charlie and Nick have mentioned the different scenarios where you compare, but again, I'd encourage where possible, you start working your way through. You look at the grey infrastructure and you look at maybe one or two nature-based solutions, and then you can start kind of comparing and refining between the solutions. But in many cases, there's also a need for hybrid solution where it's part grey, part nature-based. There are some parts of the coastline that are just mangroves will not grow, rocks are not available, the waves are too high, and so there is a need for grey. But that doesn't mean it needs to be just grey. There are ways of doing hybrids. And likewise, yeah, some places we're insisting on mangroves and they're just not growing. And I think there's a need for looking for variation. It could be seagrass, and there's other NBS options available. So I'm gonna skip a little bit and just just kind of show a little bit some of the inputs for this Excel tool. So for those that like Excel sheets, then this probably looks amazing to you. But in essence, we look at the cost, we look at the benefits, we look at costs in terms of capital costs, in terms of O&M costs, and O&M costs really need to be spread out. Likewise, capital costs, depending on what kind of intervention it is, it could take a few years to put in place. And then the benefits for NBS are often long-term. I'd encourage beyond 10 years. 10 years is often how long many of these NBS solutions take to kind of get to full potential. So the longer, the better. And as Charlie mentioned, here we've put a discount rate that's been used by several institutions in the Pacific. It's not too low, not too high. 6% is probably a good rate if you're starting, but as Charlie mentioned, it's good to look at different factors, and obviously the ministries of finance will have a say in what this discount rate should be for your country and the type of intervention. So this is kind of what the results would look like using this tool. So comparing the different options, you can see the reds are the costs and the blues are the benefits. So my PowerPoint is currently being... so we can see the option 3 and 4 are showing both in terms of costs and benefits, much higher costs and benefits, but it does seem it would need to, it's not a simple, this one is the best option. So this is why it's good to think about the potential benefits and what they are, and what that value might be for the different location. So I've got some better examples, specific examples for Tonga, Fiji, and Vanuatu a bit later, where we'll be able to see this a bit more clearly. But in effect, you see that it takes time for some of the costs to be offset for NBS. And some of the key indicators to look at are the cost and benefit ratio and the present value of costs and the present value of benefits. And I'm seeing Rakesh is coming back online, which probably means that I'm over time, so I will wrap up. And I'd encourage to look at a little further at the slides, and there's also the contact of my colleague Shavin Kumar, who prepared these slides and also prepared the tool. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for those practical insight, I would say. And it was great to hear about the tools we can implement, making CBA more accessible and actionable in our work. So now let's shift to a more interactive format, and we are heading into our breakout session. But before we do that, I would like to give 1 minute to our comms person, Jacinta. She would like to take a photo for this session, and then we'll move to the breakout session.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Oh, sorry about the echo. Okay. Requesting everyone if you can turn on your cameras for a minute for a picture. So let's just wait for everyone to turn on their cameras, and then I can take the image. Okay. Okay. Can I get big smiles, please? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacinta. So now we'll have a bit of interactive session where you'll be divided into groups. So since our number is 36 today, we'll have 4 groups, and you'll be working in your groups to together. Please work in collaboration and discuss the question. So looking at the question for this breakout group, I've given a very simple, because CBA is a very technical concept, as you can see how it is developing. So just starting from a basic level at a community level, for example, if you have a project that you can think of, what are the two main benefits and two main costs of a nature-based solution project in your country? So attending the 3 previous webinars, you would now know what is nature-based solution projects, and just look for one project, discuss in your own country. So there's a lot of benefits and cost associated to any project. You can just discuss and list at least two main benefits and cost of any projects that you can think of, which is nature-based solution at the community, at your community level. So we will be working in our groups for 15 minutes. And then after that, we'll come and all the 4 groups will present their finding, and then we'll move to the next speakers. So very soon you'll be going out into your breakout groups. So welcome back everyone, and I hope you found your discussions enriching, and you managed to discuss some points on CBA. So before we go to the next speaker, we would like to hear from you what you discussed in your group about the cost and benefits of CBA. So because we had few people in group 4, group 3, so we have only 3 groups now. So we have group 1, group 2, and group 4. So if group 1 could just go ahead and briefly present what you discussed in your group. Anyone from group 1?
I'm not sure if I'm aware of which group I was in, to be honest.
Okay, group 1, we had Anasani, Anthony, Aarti, Denzel.
Thank you everyone. So in our group, sorry, my name is Anthony, and I work at the Ministry of Agriculture and Waterways, Fiji. I'll be giving one example, and my other colleague, Miss Fifine from Vanuatu, she'll be giving the second example. So in my line of work here at the Ministry of Agriculture and Waterways, I work at the Department of Waterways. We were discussing in our group, I was sharing with my group members our NBS projects in the coastal protection, in the coastal sector. So at the Ministry of Waterways, we started implementing the NBS seawall in 2020. Prior to that, 2019 backwards, the ministry usually implement the traditional structures, which is concrete reinforcement or concrete seawall, just boulder revetment works. Compare that to the NBS seawall we are implementing now, the difference in the cost is very, there's a lot of difference. Concrete seawall just for one coastal protection project can, the ranging of the cost can be from 800,000 Fijian dollars to 1.5 million, compared to the current NBS we're implementing now, just for one project site, it's somewhere around 150 to 200,000 Fijian. One of the main difference is because the method or the model we are using, we're using the public-private partnership model, whereby we engage the local communities to provide the raw material for the project, whereas the traditional seawall, the government is buying everything, including the hiring of the contractor to implement the program. Thank you. And I now will give the time for Ms. Fifine from Vanuatu to give the example. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Hello everyone, my name is Susan Charlie. I'm a trainer at the Vanuatu Institute of Technology. I am just going to elaborate more on that from an example that we used from Vanuatu. So with the example from Vanuatu, I'm just going to explain what the students are involved in. I am a trainer in Certificate 3 in Resilience program to do with climate change and disaster risk reduction. So we are also involved or part of the PPAC Plus project in replanting of trees and maintenance of the seedlings at the Takape water catchment area. So with this one, the cost is and everything is budgeted for by Kiwa, and then Kiwa and PPAC Plus, so that's a project under which is under PPAC Plus. So we only help. Our part is to help in the replanting of trees and also maintenance of the seedlings. So with that, I can say that it helps a lot because it helps in increasing the carbon sink. Not only that, but it also increases it helps to purify the water, the catchment area. Not only that, it also helps improve food security because some of the trees that are planted and stand are fruit trees. The area in which the project is located in is out of bounds, but unfortunately, there are people going in there because the area used to be people's garden, so they're going to get harvest. So I don't know how much, or I don't know the cost in which for in this project, but I'm only explaining the part where the students are involved in replanting of the trees and also the planting of seedlings and maintenance of trees. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiffin, for that. Phyllis, have I can see you have raised your hand. You wanted to add something?
Yes. Okay. During the discussion, we provide some examples from Vanuatu.
Yeah.
And this one is on the island outside Port Vila, and they were having problem with the soil erosion, and these sites above the localities were on this island during heavy rainfall, then all of the soils are being washed down to the lacuna. It's on the side of the village. So through the Department of Forestry, that was some years back, they established planting of pine to act as a barrier to control soil erosion, and incorporating it with vetiver grass, and it seems to work pretty well. It gives the solution to the soil erosion, the seawater being polluted, but on the other hand, it spreads very fast. It's becoming an invasive, although the communities are utilizing the logs for timbers for the houses, and also creating income out of the pine plantation. And these pine were the Caribbean pine, Pinus Caribbeans. So the communities are sort of benefit from the pine establishment, still ongoing as to today. Yeah. So that's one of the cost benefit from our side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Can we have group 1? Sorry, group 2. I think Natalie, you were in group 2.
Okay, so I took a few notes, and I'm also conscious of time, so I'll just summarize what I noted, but I would ask people that were there to also jump in and add. So there was some interventions from Tonga and Fiji. So in Tonga, we heard of one intervention on food security, which related to food security, which was around marine protection. And the costs associated with that were actually also technical expertise. and in some cases, due to land costs, some exchange had to be done there, but the benefits were seen. There was a production of giant clams, and there was some increase in production there. I think that in Tonga, there was also some efforts in agroforestry, and I think Live and Learn are there. They're well known for a lot of their hard work in mangroves. And for Fiji, CBA has been done for relocation. When we are looking at more MBS type options, I think seawalls is the one where a lot of work has gone in for CBAs, using CBAs rather, and the benefits to ecosystems have been noticed. A lot of that includes mangroves and boulders, which have some associated costs depending on the location. There was an interesting intervention, I'm sorry, I didn't write down the name, but also just different stakeholders or also look a little bit more at some aspects or other. And so from an academic perspective, they often look a lot more about the economic benefits, and the costs are the ministries of finance or other institutions would maybe be better suited to find those costs. I'll stop there, but I'm sure others in the group can add. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie, for that. So we have heard from group 1 and group 2. I think Phyllis represented group 4, unless group 4 have any other comments or any other things to speak on. Group 4. So thank you so much for this sharing your. We can see that it's wonderful to see how diverse perspective can enhance our understanding. Actually, we are applying CBA already at our community level, as we have heard from our colleagues. So while we are not able to give you a lot of time to speak, please, if you want to share more success stories on CBA or cost benefit analysis that you are engaged with, please can you just put it on the chat so that everyone can have access to it and share what is being done at community level. So up next we have Natalie, who will bring us a case study that showcases the application of CBA in Fiji, Tonga and Vanuatu. So it's very interesting to see how this theory is now getting into action. So Natalie, can we call you again to the stage to speak about these case studies? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So these case studies, some of you present may have been at some of the workshops that have been held through Pippin on this. The idea here is just to give some examples and highlights, and obviously happy to answer any questions offline later if they can't be addressed today. So I'll just give a little bit of the background as to why we perform this CBA for Fiji, Vanuatu, and Tonga, and then the case studies for the 3 different countries. So the Pippin project, which is done with IUCN in the lead and SPC and SPREP as co-implementing partners, has 2 outputs. One being cost-benefit analysis for 3 countries across the Pacific. So the idea is 3 countries were selected, but just more as demonstration countries. That doesn't mean there is no interest to do it in others. It's just these were selected as demonstration countries, and also there were some selected sectors which were good representations of sectors where MBS has the most potential in the Pacific. So the idea was to come up with some case studies in similar sectors so that there could be some comparison between the countries, because really MBS is a local specific solution in some cases, but there are some cross learnings that can happen. And then the other output is an investment strategy for the region for NBS. So I'm actually at the end of this, but all the reports are finalized and have been circulated to different people, but happy to circulate to any that hasn't received it to date. So the sectors that were considered in the case studies can be summarized in two, depending on how you look at it. They can be three, but there's a close interlinkage in the Pacific, and mainly due to the size, often, aside from PNG. Climate smart agriculture and forestry often interlinked. And then the climate resilient landscape. So they're kind of two concepts which were looked at in the different countries. And the cases that we selected were done after consultations with stakeholders, where we looked at projects that had some potential to happen and were important for the country, and also where there was data available. So for Fiji, there was a revegetation of the floodplain for the Bar catchment. Oops, sorry, I'm clicking. Also agroforestry in Taveuni. For Tonga, the agroforestry in Ohona. For Vanuatu, climate smart agriculture in the Malay catchment. And again, in the three countries, there were also some case studies looking at climate resilient coastal landscape. So I will just focus on one for each country. It doesn't mean it's the best or anything. It's just it's looking at different examples and what this looked like. So again, it was using the tool which was developed by Shalvin, and it helps visualize a little bit what the costs are, and you can really see with NBS that the benefits, which are green here, come much later into the game, and they kind of peak after the 10th year, which is why I mentioned earlier, for NBS, it's really important to look long-term. Yeah, and the costs may look considerable at the beginning, but they're offset over time in many cases. So looking at a case study for Fiji, so it's the revegetation of the floodplain and Bar. So this is something that's actually I'm trying to push through. We've supported with several feasibility studies for this. There's a lot of previous work that's also been done by many partners on this area. So for those that don't know, Bar, it's one of the larger towns in Fiji in the northwestern part of the main island Viti Levu. And it has a river that comes down from the mountains into the floodplains. It was previously a sugarcane growing area, partly because of this river. But now what Bar's experiencing is floods every year with some quite consequent damages. So if we are to keep doing nothing, what is happening is that there's dredging happening. Here it's noted every 10 years, but actually I am pretty sure it's happening every 2 or more years. That has a cost, but it also affects the ecosystems of the river. And there's a loss of land through erosion, and the damages and the socio-economic losses due to this annual flooding is quite significant. So there are classic infrastructure interventions that are possible, such as levees, flood walls, more systematic dredging, but this would all disrupt the natural ecosystems, and in addition be far more expensive. And this is what the CBA is trying to identify. And NBS scenarios, so there's many different options, and there is one that was done in for this example, but there are some also hybrid options which are not noted in this example, but that are probably ones that I'm working with a few consultants to put through a proposal, and that would probably be the one that we put through as recommended to the government. So if we look at the costs and the benefits, in terms of benefits, right now the damages downstream are on average close to $5 million US a year. In terms of costs, so, apparently around 4 million every 2 years. I think it's possibly that's more frequent than that, but it's significant. And not really sustainable for in many ways. So in terms of benefits, if we're looking at the MBS scenario, there are some non-timber forest products. There's some potential carbon sequestration, and of course, there's the avoided damages, which haven't been quantified, but were mentioned before. And the costs for the revegetation is being quantified based on several databases that are available for this area. And already from the numbers, we can see that the MBS is looking good, but when we actually start putting it in, so there's a lot of detailed numbers that were put in and detailed options, and these were put into the CBA. So if we look at the costs, there's a few scenarios that have been put in here, but the gray scenario is really quite expensive, and the benefits are limited to the avoided damages in effect. Whereas the MBS scenario, there are some costs and they do go over time, as there's quite a bit of upkeep needed with the MBS scenarios, but the benefits far outreach. And you can see with the current scenario, the costs and the benefits are kind of offsetting each other, but it seems like a waste of current financing to just be doing dredging. And so this is what a typical output would look like from a CBA. We're looking at the different scenarios, the costs, the NPV, and the benefit to cost ratio. Again, I wouldn't look at the numbers too much. I think the idea is just to look at how we look at different scenarios. And these need to be refined with more detailed studies on the options. And for BAR in particular, there's a need for modeling to actually check on some of the combinations of solutions and what the effect they will have. And there's a possibility of refining and reducing the cost that way. So then for Tonga, we're looking at quite a different situation, one that colleagues from Tonga will probably be familiar with, those online. So Papua, it's recognized for its cultural and ecological significance. There's a lot of mangroves, but there's a lot of loss of mangroves, and it's actually in an area where there's some cultural protected emblematic remains there, the ring ditches as well. So there's a need to protect that area. It protects the coastline. It also has quite a complex ecosystem, a nursery for fish. It has many ecological and economic benefits. And the loss of mangroves has really reduced the biodiversity and impacted water quality. So if things are to carry on, the mangrove areas in Papua are unlikely to recover naturally, and this would have an impact on the area. So looking at an MBS scenario, this has been costed. So the key inputs, again, there's databases looking at the average costs of ecosystems and the benefits. And these are noted here, but it's just to show that there needs to be data, and if possible, the more local, the better. And looking into each solution, there's a need for kind of technical adapted solutions. So here, the mangroves, it's a multi-year restoration program, and that's been costed here. So here we can see there's some high-ish upfront costs the first year, and then just kind of more the maintenance cost to keep, and also the revegetation takes time, estimated to take quite a few years to complete that large area. But the benefits really start kicking in from the 6th, 7th year, with a peak around the 16th, 17th year. Again, these will change depending on the discount rate that you use. That was mentioned earlier. We've used the discount rate of 6, which is a reasonable one, but it would be up to also ministries of finance in respective countries to check what is the most representative for investments or interventions in their particular country. But there's a clear benefit for this mangrove restoration. There's a few social considerations in this particular area. People like to have wild pigs, which actually destroy a lot of the efforts there. So there's a few things to be taken into consideration, some land being reclaimed. So I think it's one thing is to do the CBA, but the other is to understand the local context. And it might look good on paper, but there's a few other additional things to take into consideration when making the final decision. The third case is Vanuatu. So here we're looking at the Tagabe River, which is one of the main water supply for Port Vila in Vanuatu. And you can see it's there's some high ground upstream of the river. And because of the activities in that upstream area, we're seeing, and also climate change, changes in rain patterns, we're seeing increased flow rates into this river, and also increased sediments coming down from this kind of affected area upstream. So there's been a lot of logging, there's a lot of cash crops being planted, and the removal of trees has meant there's a lot more sediment coming down. So that actually, with flooding, can cause some erosion, and the transport of the sediment has actually been noted even into the reefs close by, which affects then the sea life as well. So it really has quite a knock-on effect on many things. And an MBS solution would be really quite cost-effective. We'll see how. And I think you'll notice so that there are 2 rivers, but both are close to this runway, which you can see in the picture, and the runway is actually also being affected. It's not being taken into consideration for the CBA for in this particular case, but really should be taken into consideration in view of the vital nature of the infrastructure. So there are a lot of data needed, the cost of restoration and the value, the yields. There's a lot of data needed to do an accurate CBA, and this was done by a consultant and checked by ourselves. And what we've seen is this restoration would have some costs in the first few years, but the benefits, without taking into account the effect on the airport, which would probably blow this completely out of water, the benefits already are really quite significant and worthwhile, as well as the kind of obvious damage across the board and the effects on tourism for the coastline. So these are just examples, and I'm going to stop here. There's a full set of reports that are available. We've shared with many of the stakeholders already, but again, they'll be disseminated, I guess, to a larger audience soon. And then the next step is looking at financing options. So that's what the regional strategy for financing MBS is trying to look into. So I'll stop there and thank you very much. Back to you, Rakeshni.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for the case studies. Like Natalie mentioned, I know there's a lot in that presentation. The presentation will be shared with you as a post-webinar resource. So you can have a look at the details of the figures that is all in the presentation for each country. So now let's take a look at a bigger picture and understanding how CBA results can influence our national policy decisions is very crucial for scaling up our initiative. So I'm very excited to introduce our final speaker, which is Mr. Nilesh Gounder, who will share his insights on this topic. So Dr. Gounder, please.
Yeah, thank you, Rakeshni, and good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me, Rakeshni?
Yes, yes,
My
I
voice
can
clear?
hear you. Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, there might be a few disruptions as my internet connection is not so strong today, so please pardon me for that. Firstly, I'd like to thank SPC and GGI for organizing this this webinar on CBA for nature-based solutions, and I must also thank SPC for doing this work, not only recently, but going back to 2010. We, SPC and USP, used to partner with OSI to build capacity in the region in cost-benefit analysis for civil servants in Fiji, Vanuatu, Samoa, Tonga, and a few other countries. So just want to take an opportunity to thank SPC for the initiative. In terms of the utilization of cost-benefit analysis, I'll speak from Fiji's perspective, and I don't have any slides today, but I'll just speak on our experience here in Fiji and how we are looking at cost-benefit analysis. At the moment, cost-benefit analysis is not institutionalized in the sense that there is no legal requirement to do a cost-benefit analysis so far. But with the new National Development Plan in effect from 1st Jan 2025, there is requirement under monitoring and evaluation to conduct cost-benefit analysis for outputs where required. So it's not a requirement to conduct a cost-benefit analysis for every output that's been listed in the National Development Plan, but for it's required for some big ticket items so that we can understand what are the outcomes of the outputs that has been achieved over the it's been achieved through the implementation of the National Development Plan. So we are looking at cost-benefit analysis as one of those tools that will allow us to better understand the outcomes. But from a governance perspective, cost-benefit analysis is important because it will provide the transparency and the accountability that policy implementation requires. For example, cost-benefit analysis provides clear thinking in terms of what are the costs and what are the benefits of a policy action. So from that perspective, it's a powerful tool, and the Fiji government is keen to develop capacity within Ministry of Finance, but also across the government to ensure that we have capacity in ministries and agencies to be able to implement cost-benefit analysis wherever required. My take is that this should be an important tool, and with the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation framework for National Development Plan coming into effect in the next few months, as the implementation of the National Development Plan has just started. So the monitoring and evaluation is going to follow. So as the monitoring and evaluation is enhanced, we will be utilizing cost benefit analysis more often, mainly related to some big ticket items in the national development plan. So from that perspective, I think understanding what a CBA is and the advantages of using a CBA, and also what purpose a CBA serves, is really important. So thank you for organizing this workshop, and this will be important to create broader awareness, but also build some capacity amongst civil servants in Fiji. But also I see that we have participants from the region as well. So I think the webinar is a good start to ensure that we create more awareness and also build some capacity regarding cost benefit analysis. And in case of Fiji, it's really important to understand what is the worth of government spending. It's not only in the area of nature-based solutions policy undertaking, but other areas as well. And the CBA is a tool which will allow us more clear thinking into the worth of government actions, and we are using taxpayers' funds to implement policies. And CBA is one of those tools that will allow us to understand what is the returns of the money that we are spending to implement different policies. And the cost benefit ratio, for example, will tell us what is the worth of every dollar of spending, or the returns to each dollar that we spend. So it's from that perspective, is going to be an important and a powerful tool. I see that the integration of CBA into the nature-based solutions is interesting, and it will be very useful for the future, because not only for Fiji, other Pacific Island countries as well. From Fiji's perspective, the National Development Plan outlines several strategies in the agriculture sector, also in the forestry sector and fisheries sector, that will require nature-based solutions. And with the approach to integrating CBA into the nature-based solutions, it puts forward an interesting area of policy analysis to provide more information as to what is the actual worth of the policies that we are implementing. But I think it's also important to note that CBA is the tool. The decisions at the end of the day will be made by policymakers. So we must not assume that the CBA is an end tool. It's a tool that will allow us to make better decisions. This is where we can greater than benefits, but we still have to implement those strategies and policies, because it's important. It's a powerful tool that will allow policymakers and decision makers and governments to be more clear in terms of what are the actual costs and what are the actual benefits. The tool can also be used to incentivize policy actions. It can also be used to convince policymakers to be able to implement a policy, or to find money to fund policy options, because it can clearly outline what are the benefits that can be achieved through the implementation of particular policies and strategies. So I think I'll stop there, and thank you very much for this opportunity for us to come and say something about how we are utilizing. And I must admit that we are not utilizing cost benefit analysis from a perspective from a broader perspective, but at the moment it's a more open ad hoc approach, wherever it's required, but it's spending above a particular threshold, should require a cost-benefit analysis. That's something we are looking at in Fiji at the moment. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nilesh, for taking out your time and also enlightening the participants on how CBA plays such an important role in decision-making tool as a decision-making tool, and also for funding. At least this, so we are just setting the baseline on how CBA is very important for integration into NBS. So thank you so much for your enlightenment on this session. So yeah, Natalie, you have a question on this?
Yeah, I thank you so much, Dr. Ganda, for your intervention. And I forgot to share that actually I just came back from a mission with Rakeshni and Utilai from Spirit, where we were in Vanuatu, and actually the Ministry of Finance in Vanuatu is looking at using CBA as part of a cribbing so they have a system which is called the NAB, which is an advisory board that looks through all projects that are coming into Vanuatu. And these are from development partners, from the World Bank, from ADB, from NGOs, and even government. They all go through the NAB through a process where there's a committee with representatives from each ministry. And Ministry of Finance is on that committee, and they meet 3-4 times a year, and it's a fantastic platform. But the Ministry of Finance is considering using the CBA tool as part of a cribbing criteria, especially for NBS projects, in view of the benefits on the long term. So infrastructure often has a shorter term ROI and so on, but NBS are quite particular projects. And so we've made some headway, and I had a session just with Ministry of Finance people in Vanuatu, and it seems like they may be taking this on as part of a tool. And so I'd be happy to also speak to anyone at MOF also if this is of interest. But I think systematizing, and I don't mean that this tool has to be used, but CBA in itself is a tool. But I totally agree it's a tool. It is not taken into account the practicalities and the other issues around. I mentioned the pigs in Tonga that eat up the mangroves, but there's so many contextual issues that one cannot reflect in a CBA tool. So ultimately it's to the policy decision maker. But thank you so much for your intervention.
No, thank you, Natalie. I totally agree. And it's good to see the way Vanuatu has arranged the platform so that CBA can be conducted wherever possible. We have also started in Fiji capacity building within strategic planning office to ensure that we have people with skill sets to conduct CBA when and wherever required. But at the moment, it's mainly focused on infrastructure and social protection policies, etc. We haven't really, I'll be honest, we haven't even thought about nature-based solutions, but so thank you for the invitation. It's good to hear the good work that your team is doing, and I'll try to arrange a meeting perhaps in the next week to see what we can learn from the work that you are doing, and how the work that you're doing now might be useful for our work in the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the National Development Plan. Yeah, so thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Natalie and Nilesh. So we have one question in the chat box from Harsha. What could be some of the limitations of CBA? Any of the speakers can give some of the limitations of...
Yeah, is it? Yeah, so if I can make a start, if that's all right with the others.
Sure, go ahead. Thank you, Nilesh, for taking...
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think CBA is, I've done a few CBAs in my previous life as a consultant for regional organizations, international organizations, is that sometimes can be too focused, and we might miss the benefit to the community as a whole. And as Natalie has rightly pointed out, it's just a tool to understand the costs and benefits. So it just provides some degree of clear thinking as to how much it's going to cost and what are the benefits. The difficult part, in my experience as a consultant for CBA, is quantifying the benefits, which are not so easy. And from a community perspective, sometimes it's very difficult to quantify the non-monetary benefits. And if these are not captured well, you might not see the real.
I think there's some network issues. Sorry for that. I think he's having some network issues. I think internet is not very strong here in Fiji today. So in case while we are trying to get him back online, we have just come to the end of this webinar session, and please to take just a small time, maybe to just fill up the feedback session for this webinar. The response that we are getting from this feedback session, we are trying to improve on the next webinar. So please do take some time to just click on the link or through this QR code. Just feel how you feel about this honest opinion on this webinar, and we'll try to improve on that. Having said that, I would like to thank all the speakers for being part of this webinar, attending the pre-webinar meeting, and also preparation for this preparation of slides and being part of this. And also the lovely participants, thank you all for an engaging session, being part of the breakout session. And I know this topic is it's a big topic to be covered in a small this small time, but what you have heard from our experts is that I'll be also sharing the details of experts. If you're having project and if you like to go back to them, they can always be available. Plus, I'll be sharing all the presentations with you. And I think Mr. Nilesh is back.
Yeah,
You
sorry,
can
there's
continue.
sorry for the bit of disruption. I just wanted to finish off by saying that if we are unable to quantify the benefits for the community as a whole or for the region, then it might not look like if we implement a solution or a policy implementation as highly beneficial. So that's one of those things on the flip side, is that it might not truly, sometimes, not always, not be able to capture the benefit. So it may be a narrow focused CBA, and no matter how we try, it might not be very clear. So that's why a CBA report should have a sensitivity analysis and capturing the different parameters and the assumptions used. And if you are clear about the assumptions, but not everyone has the technical skills to read and understand a CBA, and the community may not truly understand the nature of what the CBA is trying to present. So that's just one of those challenges that we might face. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gounder, for clarifying, and thank you, Mr. Vinay, for your contribution. So we are coming to the end of this webinar, and thank you all for joining. And we have finished the first 4 webinars of the PIPIN webinar series, and the 5th one is on the 13th of May. And that one is that webinar is about project development. So we are starting from development of concept node to securing fund for this project. So after project development, then we'll have implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. So we are trying to cover the overall things that came out from needs assessment under this webinar series. So thank you, Team GGI, and also the Fiji government who have joined us in this webinar. So I'll See you all in the next webinar, and thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Naka, bye.
Thank
Goodbye,
you.
everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. Goodbye.